Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the Black History Speaker Series, or Black History Month Speaker Series. Before I introduce you to our guest, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Asya Ghazi. I am one of the graduate assistants here at the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine University and our Center for Global Partnerships and Learning. And we'll be facilitating this session for everyone this evening, along with my colleague, Charlotta Green. A little about the center. The center provides GCEP students with a myriad of services ranging from publication support, certificate programs, access to GCEP's academic journal, and a few other services. It is through the center that we bring you our programming to celebrate this Black History Month that we have scheduled for all of you. With that said, I am going to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. LaSchanda Johnson. Now, Dr. LaSchanda Johnson works as an adjunct professor at the nation's largest college district. She previously worked at It Takes a Village Community Foundation in Los Angeles, California, as the Community Outreach Director. Dr. Johnson earned a Bachelor of Science in Political Science from Southern University and A&M College, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Phoenix, and a Doctorate in Educational Leadership, Administration, and Policy, or as we know it here as ELAP, from Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education and Psychology. Her educational leadership experience includes endeavors to standardize operating policies and processes for colleges and students. Dr. Johnson leverages her leadership knowledge to provide process improvement guidance, education, and suggestions to the district's executive team and the college's senior leadership team. In addition, Dr. Johnson devotes her time to serve the community through a variety of community outreach services. Thank you so much, Dr. LaSchanda. Let me go ahead and put you in speaker view and make sure that you are in spotlight for everyone. It is all you, Dr. LaSchanda. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Black History Month series. Thank you, Dr. Ghazi, for your great introduction. So really quick, I just want to give you a background about myself. As Dr. Ghazi mentioned, I am an adjunct professor, but I'm also an internal auditor for one of the largest districts in the United States. I recently had the luxury of participating in a program called Project Match, which was an internship program for adjunct professors. And that way you were able to become certified with the course module known as Canvas. And Canvas is the module that is used throughout the 50 states for online teaching for community college students. So I was able to become certified in online teaching and also certified in Canvas. So once again, I want to say thank you so much. I have a program that's loaded with a little bit of tools and then a lot of tools, but at the same time, it's all information. This study is, in particular, my why. I wrote this study as I was doing my dissertation. As mentioned, I am a community college employee, so my focus was to understand how Black women that I saw as leaders acquired these leadership positions. The reason why I wanted to know my why is because there were several times in which I tried to move forward, but I was met with a few challenges. So I wanted to understand what they were and if I was the only one pretty much experiencing the phenomena, or was it something across the board? So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into it. And at the same time, I wanted to be able to add best practices and strategies so it can be useful for those that look like me, that are African-American women trying to make their way in higher education and go into leadership roles. So I'm going to share my slides. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the title of this presentation is Keys to Success for African-American Women Leaders and Community Colleges. So as previously explained, the community colleges is the arena in which I work. So the focus of the study was done in a community college setting. So let's jump right in. Black in higher education. What is that? What is that? Feel free to also, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can also put them in the chat as Dr. Ghazi and Charlotta will actually read from the chat. So if there are any questions that come up while I'm speaking, feel free to add them to the chat box or just raise your hand. You can use your icons as well. So over many decades, the composition of university and colleges and faculties have been the focus, I want to say, of controversy and discourse and concern. So in 2014, if you look at the slide, it says that African-American women represented the largest category of non-white females in academia. And so since the 1960s, equality in higher education has been a national priority as a result of the civil rights movement. And so in 2016, the American Association of Community Colleges noted that there were 12.1 million students enrolled in over 1,100 community and technical colleges across America. So from there, research suggested that 50% of the US population will be people of color by the year 2050. So let me give you a little bit of stats here so we can, before we jump into the actual presentation. So a few stats. In 2007 and 2008, a researcher noted that there was 82% community college faculty members were white, and 17% of the faculty members were of color, and 35% of the students were students of color. So over the years, you can see that the students' demographics, they've changed, but the administration's demographics have generally stayed the same despite the increasing awareness of diversity issues on college campuses. So African-American women leaders in positions continue to be scarce across the higher education institutions, according to research. So there was another study performed. And so in 2017, the American Council on Education reported that 30% of college presidents were women, and 17% were members of racial or ethnic minorities, and 9% were African-American women. So there was one researcher that mentioned that Black women were at the bottom of the hiring chain when trustees chose an administrator to oversee one of the nation's two-year colleges because of outdated perceptions and stereotypes. So as we look at research continues to suggest that there is a consensus that Black women in general typically face a plethora of academic challenges that hinder their professional development and restrict their ascendancy to leadership roles in higher education. So let's look at some of the challenge and barriers that these Black women leaders have faced. Now, due to the limited data, so this was my why. I wanted to know. So I started digging and looking through research, and the data was limited. And the limited data indicated that there was wide gaps in trying to accomplish a diverse leadership team. And at the same time, there were minimal steps taken in narrowing such these gaps. And so when I began the study, the effectiveness of the Black women leaders that I wanted to talk to, their performance was not in question, but it was their experiences and the meanings they gave to those events that have shaped their careers, and understanding the unique needs of African-American women and leadership roles, and also implementing strategies to support their continued success. and community colleges, and actually add to the body of research for those that are aspiring leaders, African-American leaders, would have something to go and look at as a roadmap before they actually embarked upon a journey. And so let's look at some of these challenging barriers, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into these challenging barriers. And as questions arise, once again, please feel free to drop them in the chat box or just raise your hand and you can unmute yourself. So let's start with the negative culture, organizational culture. So this was a theme I noticed as I did the study, and this theme was directly linked to professional challenges of understanding the power structures and how to align yourself with the structures and the culture without being perceived as the angry Black woman when you're expressing yourself. So from the negative organizational culture, there were two common factors that arise, and they were stereotypes and perceptions. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into that in another slide. And then there was a sense of belonging. And this one, I heard by many leaders that refer to professional challenges of being the first and few of Black women leaders in a community college setting. So sometimes they felt a sense of loneliness or exclusion. And then the last one was glass ceiling. And we'll talk about that too in the next slide. So the question is, I mentioned 3 barriers, 2 had common factors. I guess the question is, why do they exist? Why do we have these barriers? And we have them based on sticky floors, glass ceilings, and concrete walls. If you notice under sticky floors and glass ceilings, they have components. And these components make up the sticky floor and the glass ceiling. So let's dive into the sticky floor really quick. So the sticky floor is a phenomenon in which invisible barriers to advancement block qualified women for advancement opportunities based on attitude and biases of the organization. So if you look at it historically, society's perception of gender roles built barriers for women as they seek to move forward in leadership roles. So as these attitudes and opinions develop about women's positions in society, those views are transferred to the work community. And those beliefs have become barriers for women seeking equal opportunity to fulfill roles that they might qualify for. So these hurdles that I speak of can be identified as sticky floors, which result in the absence of a diverse population throughout the organization. And so sticky floors is also a subset of glass ceilings. And under sticky floors, you have intersectionality. Now, intersectionality is the intersection of ethnicity and gender norms within the framework between racism and power supremacy that create unequal structures and impede access of African-American women to leadership positions. And then you have double bind. And what is double bind? Double bind is gender and cultural stereotypes. This type of bias tends to impede resources and prestige accessibility to women, and has been used to, I want to say, justify incredibly small numbers of women in senior leadership positions. And then they have the stereotypes. And that's the angry Black woman stereotype, the sapphire stereotype, the Jezebel stereotype. These stereotypes have helped influence how the majority culture views impact stems from the historical Mamie character, which is the illustration of unintelligent, unnoticed, and self-surrendering woman. And so the illustration of the sapphire stereotype is being bossy and sassy and angry. And then you have the Jezebel stereotype, and that's being overly sexual and sexually crazed and the target of sexual gratification. And so as you look at research noted that these poorly constructed images remain troublesome for African American women in America. And these images are used as an excuse for mistreatment and injustice. So what we need to understand and know that the roots of African American women's stories are in American culture. And then we have the glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling was coined, I want to say, in 1978, and it was coined by Marilyn Loden. And she was at the Women's Exposition in New York, and she determined that that the term glass ceiling was the most fitting because the center of the conversation was on women and their self-image and how it was the blame for them not advancing to leadership roles. So the term glass ceiling can be described as an intangible obstacle that prevents women who are qualified from advancing within an organization due to sexism and racism. And that's mainly preventing women from moving up the job ladder within an organization. And so as a subcomponent of glass ceilings, you have marginalization and microaggressions. And marginalization and microaggressions are implicit insults that emerge in the workplace. And when we talk about marginalization, we talk about social isolation, intellectual marginalization in higher education institutions. And marginalization may be implicit, and sometimes the words and behaviors used to marginalize can be quickly ignored or overlooked. So for example, assuming someone will act a certain way based on stereotypes about their identity. For example, as you guys see on the screen, I'm Black and I have cornrows. That is something that is looked at as marginalization. So based on that, they think I should act a certain type of way based on the fact that I am Black and I wear my hair braided, and it is actually has a burgundy tint to it. And so the microaggressions that are faced microaggressions are actually words, and they words that apply daily. I want to say direct and beautiful, sometimes unconscious and nonverbal interactions between African American women and individuals. So sometimes microaggression sounds like, I have several Black friends. Or it says, as a woman, I know what you go through as a racial minority. So those are some of the microaggressions that are heard, but they're not limited to. Those are not the only ones. These are just examples given here today. But what was interesting the most when it came to African American women, we've heard about the sticky floors and we've heard about the glass ceilings and marginalizations and microaggressions and intersectionality and stereotypes. But what is new and was adopted within 10 years is the concrete walls. And that was adopted 10 years ago, and it has been put on the radar for discussion through academic writing and media outlets. So the exact root of the word is truly unknown, but the word describes hurdles encountered by African American women as they advance in their careers as being in a league of their own. So the concrete walls, rigid, the construction allows too few women of color to crack into it. And so when you saw Kamala Harris win the VP seat, what you saw was not only a woman of color break the glass ceiling, but she also broke through a concrete wall, which is this is an impenetrable wall facing African American women, impossible to see and impossible to break through. So what are my personal experiences of the challenges? Well, I've been called the angry Black woman. And what research has shown, when you have an opinion and you have a question and you ask questions and you're passionate about a topic, your passion can be misconstrued as being overly aggressive. And it comes off as being disgruntled. Or you have a blank face, and they call it the poker face, because you don't know whether to smile or to keep a plain face, because if you smile, then you're really not paying attention and you're not interested. But then if your face is a stale face, then she's not really interested in the topic. She doesn't look like she's engaging. There's no interaction. So these pretty much titles are given, and I've heard this throughout my study, and I interviewed 15 women. An angry Black woman was 100% for all of the 15 Black women. And these are all women that held the title of director or higher in a higher education institute. So that was really personal to me at that point, because I says, wow, I'm not the only one that heard this. But then there was another experience as sticky floors. And that's when you're between a middle management seat and a leader in a leadership seat and lower management. And you're trying to pivot forward, but you can't pivot forward. So I'll give you an example. I operate daily in the role of an internal auditor. I'm at a mid-level position. It's a mid-level management. And the question is, well, is it mid-management or should it be senior level management? Well, I'm stuck between the two. Well, here's why. Because literature, old literature, for the role of an auditor gives a certain topic of things that you do. This is what you do. Although that particular role isn't a checkbox role. As an auditor, you never know what you're going to get when the audit starts. You don't know. And so as an auditor, your role is to go in and analyze and assess the situation, and then provide recommendations of how to fix a process or a procedure to an executive team. When you present that to an executive team, you're acting in the capacity in a leadership role. When you engage in an audit and you take the lead on the audit and you make certain calls in the audit that is beneficial to the processes and procedure, you're operating in the fact of a leader. But when you have policies that are written that don't truly address the role in which you are performing, then you're stuck between two floors. And that's sticky. Because number one, they say, hey, you're not qualified enough to move forward into a leadership role because you truly don't act like a leader. But you say to yourself, wait a minute, I do. I write up audit programs. I perform audit steps. I provide feedback. I give direction. I'm the only one that sees every aspect of this entire educational system. I touch every single department outside of everyone. So why is it that I'm stuck between two floors? And I said, I wanted to know. So then that's when I realized at this moment, you're stuck. It's sticky. So as you walk, there's glue at the bottom of your feet every time you step forward. Even though you're operating and you're giving leadership qualities and you have the skill set to move forward in which the areas in which you oversee and look at. And then there's glass ceilings. And from personal experiences, I've watched associate vice presidents be promoted to vice presidents without the tools to perform the job. So there were no tools. So we have someone who went from a mid-level to a senior level position and didn't have any support system nor an executive team to help them. But they were entitled and charged with running an higher ed educational system and actually one of the institutions. And at that point, although they had broke the glass ceiling, they couldn't get through the concrete wall to be successful because they didn't have the tools to be able to survive. And so what strategies and best practices did these women discuss? You see on my screen code switching. Some call it conforming. And code switching is a way of showing various versions of oneself depending on the situation and circumstances. And so this process here may enable women of color to adapt, but it may also make them appear to be authentic. Fitting into the social roles of race and gender has been a challenge for Black women. And many have failed at their code switching and conformity efforts. And then you have another practice of sacrifice of self. As African-American women, you know, we are raised in homes that are gender neutral in households, and responsibilities are conditioned by these activities, and that they need to over prepare and work twice as hard. And then you see women's resilience. And the resilient leader is someone successful, showing the capacity to grow and adapt and improve a range of hurdles that arise. And then another practice was professional development. And that was leadership and networking programs must be provided to African-American women. And that's starting early in their careers as they lack the exposure of professional development may impact their future advancement. And then mentoring was another one that was mentioned. And mentoring African-American women in the field of education will allow them to improve awareness and make and build relationships and learn how to work effectively in educational leadership. And then you have social networking. And social networking as an integral part of the growth and advancement of leadership, producing successful career advancements results in networking and becoming network affiliated are really good opportunities for job progress. And then additionally, social networking is every point of an enterprise. So it is made clear that creating and sustaining and optimizing relationships is part of leadership development. So this is what I found out in my study. So my question is, I guess the question everybody wants to know is, well, LaSchanda, which strategies have you used? And what's your perspective on the strategies? Well, I've used all of them. And I used all of them because I wanted to see if the study that was performed, if these steps actually worked. And so when we talk about the strategies that I mentioned, we talk about sacrificing of self. I work very long days and I've sacrificed that. And after I've gotten off work, I've done my continued education piece because I want to grow. So I've added that piece. But then I also went to mental health. So that's for healthy reasons. So this is all sacrificing of self. And when it comes to women's resilience as a leader, I often am found in a situation as an auditor who delivers sometimes unfavorable messages, finding myself quickly to recover. Because not only am I delivering messages to the managers, but I'm actually giving the information to the presidents and the vice presidents of the college, and also the deans. So, and sometimes the chiefs. So sometimes the findings don't come off favorably. And sometimes it's not in favor of the colleges. And sometimes we have to fix a process because the risk and exposure is too high and it might cause harm to the college, which ultimately matriculates down to the student outcome. And that's not what we want to happen. So you find yourself being resilient and you find yourself recovering and taking initiative to deliver your audit findings in a different fashion. So they will be receptive, but you can also be successful at your delivery. But this not is just indicative to the role that I play. This is indicative to any time you disseminate information. Information is not always received. So sometimes we have to be resilient in how we deliver it. And not only that, quick to recover, just in case in times when we don't know all the answers and we don't have the appropriate response and they're not in our favor. And when you ask about what strategies, they mentioned professional development. I've enrolled in all workshops. You heard me mention earlier, I went to Project Match because I knew that Project Match at that point, we were in an online environment. We knew that there was a challenge between COVID-19 and academic leadership. And we also knew that it was a challenge getting the information to our students. So for myself, I enrolled in project management because I want to be more on a line with student success and also with the professional development and leadership of the women within the organization. So I began to align myself with the different programs. I became part of the Academic Education Research Association. And I wanted to know more about people of color in higher education and how they ascend to leadership. I also became part of the African American board because I wanted to be the leadership board, because I wanted to know different areas in which I can become a board member and which I can actually use and give back to the community and actually be an asset to the community. So when I say I've used them all, I've used them all. Mentoring, I sought out several mentors. I became intentional when I looked for my mentors. I made sure that they all didn't look like me. I also made sure that they all were women. And I aggressively reach out to them. I don't wait for them to reach out to me. If I see something that I think I qualify for, or if there's something that was challenging that happened and I'm not sure how to respond, then I reach out to them. And I kind of have a continued communication with them, even though sometimes it's small talk. I let them know that I'm interested and I'm concerned. And I've also made myself available. So I'm available. I volunteer at all the campuses. When we went remote, I had the chance to participate in the Black college graduation. When you sit on the business side of the house at the educational center, you often don't get those opportunities. But since everything was in the electronic world and it was a virtual world, we're able to see these things. So as I saw these different opportunities become available, I began applying. I began putting myself in situations that I normally would be uncomfortable. And those are situations in which I found success. And that's where I began my social networking, and I continue to network in that arena. So how can we continue to help African American women obtain leadership roles? Networking, professional development, and this aids to facilitate their access to leadership roles. Create mentorships in organizations as systems of support. Create institutional support in professional growth and the organization's willingness to help. Develop intentional career paths and create leadership development activities. And once I was able to get all of that, I had a few recommendations. And so from this study, I looked at the best practices, I looked at the challenges, and I says, what can we do to create an environment that colleges and universities and other industries can use to promote Black women. Not only colleges, universities, and other industries, but what can this model do for the individual person themselves? So I recommended the Globox model. Now, as a result of my research study, this was framework is a consideration for African-American leaders and aspiring African-American leaders. And so if you look at this Globox, it has 7 elements to this box. And these are elements that make up this box that were actually given in the study. And one they mentioned continued education. And so if you look at continued education, you says, in order for me to advance to leadership roles, and for those who have ascended to leadership roles, they had continued education. There were completion of trainings. They went to certification programs, degree programs. And then there were career pathways that they said, assuming the position that led to desired leadership roles, they put themselves on a path. They intentionally sought out jobs that would lead to certain seats. So for example, if you wanted to become the VP of Academic Affairs, they started aligning themselves with different programs. For example, possibly a research analyst. Then maybe a research analyst transitioned into Associate Dean of Academic Affairs. And then maybe the Dean of Academic, maybe the associate went to the Dean of Academic Affairs. So at some point they began aligning themselves with the jobs that they desired. And then there was professional development. And so in this Globox, professional development was be authentic, apply training and activities that advance the career of the individual. And then it goes to community. You hear me often talk about be intentional, finding mentorships and networking and sponsorships and allies and family support. And then it moves to leadership development activities. And those would be different events that would invite the organization or different members of the organization or different faculty or administrators or even staff level to participate in arenas to be able to grow. Project Match is assumed to be one of the ones that I've found within our district that offers leadership development activities. And then there's self-care. You often hear me say, I went to the gym. I work long days and I spend a lot of time at the gym. And that's physical and mental health. And so the perception there goes to glow notes. And so you saw the 6 ingredients that point into the box. And then you see the glow notes that point up to the box. Glow notes are strictly a list of gems to help overcome obstacles or difficulties, and they are your how-to guide. And the glow notes are prepared from research. This is research that has been performed in different areas, and you want to know how to. And although this box is not limited, this box will change. So let's look at the glow notes. Let's look at the glow box really quick. So the glow box is unique to everyone. And this box has 5 to 7 items. So ranking them is required by the individual. So they are ranked in the order of strengths. And so the glow box is scaled from 1 to 7 and being the least amount of growth needed at 1 and the most being the least amount of growth needed and 1 the most needed area for growth. And that's indicative to the need of the leader. So what you have to find out is the items in a glow box is a model for everyone, but the order in which they are ranked will be different for everyone. And so this model gives tools needed to succeed as an African-American woman leader. This glow box is an emblem of shimmy shine a showcase of strength and perseverance and a reflection of universal awesomeness, counteracting the negative stereotypes that are frequently placed on African American women by the outside world and by themselves. The Globox is one of a kind. And so depending on your area of development, some Globoxes will look identical, while others will look somewhat different. So for example, someone ranks, if you look at the Globox and they rank community as a 7, that's a strength for them. And for them, they say, hey, it's a 7. I have, because they're good on networking. Remember, community is networking and socialization. And they say, listen, I have 2,000 connections. I'm good at networking. But they're not so good at follow through. And the follow through, which may lead them, well, follow through may theoretically ruin your credibility, and that'll be due to the lack of delivery, which will lead that individual to glow notes. And then glow notes will list your gem that will help the African-American woman leader or the aspiring leader to overcome the difficulty. And it will also help them understand, know your audience and how to overcome failures. So all of this information will be located in glow notes. This is a box that will continue to grow. This is a box that will change over time. This model will continue to change as research, as more is added to the body of research, this model will continue to change and more will be added to the model. So constant nurturing of the box is required. And things that people are familiar with must be nurtured on a regular basis because they change over time as people do, and they don't stay the same. So when required, rewrite the ingredients in the Globox for your success. I hope this presentation was meaningful for you as much as it was for me. I hope that the success strategies and practices displayed are those that we can all use to ascend to leadership roles. You guys want to know where I am? I'm still using these tools. I'm still in the process of ascending to the desired leadership role. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you so much, Dr. LaSchanda. What an amazing set of information for us to wrestle with tonight. I've been looking in the chat and there's been some good back and forth in the chat. So I want to share a couple of things for you to think about. The first one is we have a question about how does race consciousness affect Black women at work? And according to you, how can we make ourselves as a leader who advances issues of race or society or both?
Can you read the first part again, Sharnetta?
Yes, I can. How does race consciousness affect Black women at work? And according to you, how can we make ourselves as leaders who advance issues of race or society or both?
So my understanding is from research and just being who I am, you're Black. You're gonna be Black every day and you can't get around it. You are a Black woman and you have history in society. And how does it play a role? It plays a role when you look at the resume and it says LaSchanda. Clearly, LaSchanda is a possibility that she's Black. So I'm identified already. LaSchanda comes in and LaSchanda has cornrows. So I'm LaSchanda, I am Black, I have cornrows. And so the question is, how does race play a part? Well, the images that society shows of people with cornrows and braids are not always sitting in the seat of doctor.
Right.
Nor are they sitting in the seat of leadership positions. Nor are they given direction or authority. And so what I say is be authentically you. Bring to the table. This is what has suggested. And so for me, I try to be authentic. I ask you to be authentic. When we say and we have questions, we have to be mindful of how we ask the questions so we don't come off as the angry Black woman. That is very challenging because no one else in my experience has had to do that.
Right.
If I am overly passionate and have tears in a meeting, then I'm misconstrued as different. Different. But if my white counterpart has tears in a meeting about a topic, then there's discussion and we're going to address it in a different fashion.
Right.
So for me, research has told me, and you guys are going to hear me say this often, what I found out, and this is as early as 2016 and 2015, that there's no research study that specifically explains the successful higher education strategies for African-American women. And so the methods used to manage the advancement of African-American women in higher education leadership roles are still very obscure and largely known. We don't have any data. There was a 40-year gap when I started doing the research when it came to Black women in higher education. So I didn't know. There was no information. The information was 40 years and a lot have changed in 40 years. And so knowing the disparity or the divide continues to exist, it is important for higher education institutions to reach the best solutions that result in equitable access and opportunities for African-American women working in higher education. So I hope I answered.
All right. Thank you for that. So I'm going to kind of do some rapid fire here because we've got lots of things going on in the chat. And I want to make sure that we get to it. So I want to acknowledge that people are supporting one another in the chat by, offering some good tips. We have a question, and I don't want to mess up your name. Is it Kivana Dover is asking, how the heck do I get this box? This and just really saying, we need to be building, or all of us need to be building our Globox. But I think the question is, how do you get to that? How do you build that? That's one. And then there's another question about DEI information, about how it's become a priority in many cases in corporate America and in name, but that the question becomes, how do we succeed at this? Leaders, peers, allies, how do we remove the sticky floors, the glass ceilings, and the concrete walls, right? So I guess it's that, how do we move from, naming something and giving voice to it and actually the action behind it and making it work? Everybody's giving you kudos. They really appreciate the Globox. And then the other question is, how do we prioritize where we are focusing when there are two domains that are equal within the Globox? So I'll let you choose how you want to answer those, since you have two about the Globoxes, and then I'll get to these last ones, but I'll let you start that.
Okay, so really quick about the Globox. The Globox is ever evolving box. I am in the process of trying to make this somewhat a model that we all can follow in somewhat a virtual form that we have access to via an app that we can go in and automatically do self-ranking for yourself. The other question was about, I guess, when you have two items that are ranked the same in the Globox. There is a possibility that might happen. You might be evenly balanced at one. So for example, Maybe you have all your continued education and you are very adamant about community. So you have your continued education, you've rose into the next level, and now you have the community support and they rank even. Here's what's interesting. They change. And they change because you change. So as you evolve, yes, currently they might be, but as you begin to grow, you're going to start to realize, yeah, maybe I need a certification. You know, I am Dr. Johnson, but maybe I need to be certified in ethical and authentic leadership. So you're going to start needing that. And then you say, well, maybe I need to get more involved in the community. Yeah, I'm only involved on this aspect of the community, but I'm not involved in any other outside activities outside of the norm of my organization. So maybe I need that. So you would have to go in and re-rank these, but as you grow, you would notice that they will start to change and you will start moving them around yourself. And you will start seeking advice that says, you know, I don't quite understand this. Maybe I should reach out. And you'll start realizing, oh, well, I don't have a mentor, or I don't practice self-care, or, oh, I only practice it once a week. You know, so you'll start noticing what your deficiencies are. And you had one more, Charlotta?
Okay, so we have another question around best practices when it comes to the unconscious bias place. You know, they're people have really good intentions, and you know, many of them are leaders and allies, and yet sometimes they contribute more to the problem, not purposefully, but just because they're unaware. So you know, what are some of the best practices as we share with folks about what it means to become an ally in being aware of these biases and addressing them in ways that are helpful and not harmful?
Well, what happens is, what I'm noticing is that they are very unconscious, and these are times for education. So you can use the education piece and start, depending on the type of relationship. So sometimes you can actually, you know, have a moment to educate. For example, I always get a chance to educate when it comes to my hair, because my hair is always a topic. So am I often in braids? No. Sometimes I have a slick, puffy ball on top of my head. And so I always explain, I have the moment where I get to explain. So I got the chance to explain about my braids and tell that the paths that you see in my braids were actually paths braided by the women that were in slavery as a trail, as an escape trail. And so what you see, that my braids are a resemblance of my heritage and my culture. And sometimes you don't see that. So you find a way to create opportunity to educate. Is everybody going to receive the education? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So it automatically also depends. But as we continue to write and interview women, and we talk about women of color, we continue to add to the body of research. No one, research doesn't truly know the strategies. What they know is a lived experience. And that's why the qualitative phenomenological study was performed, because who else can tell the better phenomena than those who lived the experience? And so that's why you're starting to see more qualitative research perform in that aspect. And that is to build to the body of research and have resources for questions such as these for us to go to and to be able to identify them and have solid research to justify some of our actions.
Right. And so I'm not sure if people are aware, but there is a group that's been around for a while. It's called Cite Black Women. And it's about making sure that we're utilizing African-American and Black writers in academia and citing their work. So you can Google that, because this is probably where some of the work that you're talking about, Dr. LaSchanda, is. This is the scholarship that many of these women are doing, but oftentimes that we don't know about it because it's not being cited. I want to acknowledge that Kay Ramsey shared her story of being let go from her job. You know, she says, I won't read all of it. I think, you know, read the piece that I think is really important is she got let go. And what she highlights is they once loved my passion, opinions, and transparency, which they once welcomed, they didn't like it anymore. And I think that's something to pay attention to for all of us. Sometimes we become the novelty in the room, and when the novelty wears off, it becomes problematic. And so I just want to make sure that Kay, we support you in
Yes.
saying we hear you and we are sorry. We don't know what we can do to help, but we're hearing you loud and clear. But keep being authentically you.
Absolutely.
There's another question about the use of the N-word and why it's okay for African Americans to use that terminology with one another, but becoming vehemently upset when a white person uses it, you know, in the workplace or toward them. Can you elaborate? How should we, being a human, or maybe let me, how can we stop using this terminology? How do we help?
So this platform is for strategies and best practices.
Right, it is. And so I want to acknowledge that that's a question that's out there. This may not be the best forum for it, but I want to acknowledge it.
Yes.
And not from Dr. LaSchanda, but from my perspective, a place to start with that is really to research the word and how it's been used and the reasons why the Black community tried to rehab it in some ways and the ways in which that fails. That's the best place to start with that. But it's a conversation that we can always have, but this is not the forum for it. We're almost at time. Are there I want to thank you all for your questions and for your information in the chat. I'm sorry we didn't read everything, but I got to all the questions. Again, I want to thank Dr. LaSchanda for, you know, the insight and the gift of the Globox that we can all begin working on. I want to say that we still have more speakers coming in the speaker event on this coming Friday. We will have Dr. Herbert Marbury from Vanderbilt University, who is a Hebrew Bible scholar and will be talking about Black history from a biblical perspective and giving a biblical insight on some things. So we hope that you're able to join us. It's at noon Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. Again, we look forward to and are so thankful that so many of you have been showing up to support this first event from GSEP in the Center for Global Partnership and Learning. And we hope that we can do this again. I'm going to offer this back over to my colleague, Dr. Asia, who is going to give you a couple of things about the next couple of speakers that are coming up as well. Again, thank you all for this evening. It's been amazing and wonderful.
Yes, everybody, thank you so much for attending. So very quickly, we do have 2 more speakers. Again, as we mentioned, Dr. Herbert Marbury is coming up. You can go to our Linktree page and you can register, and I can just drop the link right here. Linktree.com/Pepperdine. So if you go there, you can go ahead and register for our next speaker on the 18th. Also, next week on the 23rd, we are having a remembrance event for our one of our alums who graduated recently and then tragically passed away. And so we will be doing a remembrance event for Dr. Melvin Johnson. We would love for you all to attend and listen in on Dr. Ebony Kane, Dr. Jelena Mashera, Robinson Mashera, and Dr. Sungbak Lee, who will be talking about Dr. Melvin Johnson and his legacy. And then to end Black History Month, we are going to have our keynote speaker, our very own Dean Helen Williams, will be speaking on Thursday, February 24th at 5 o'clock Pacific, and that's 8 o'clock Eastern. So we will have flyers available for that when the time gets here. We're going to put it out there. We're going to email everybody with it. But please, if you'd like to come, you can sign up. I am still adding that link to our link tree, so you will not see it there just yet. But please go there and register as soon as it's on, and it'll be on within the next hour. Thank you so much, all, for attending today's event. And I look forward to seeing you all in our next events coming up Friday and next Wednesday and next Thursday.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank